Alright guys, first of all, if you hear a bunch of background noise and things like that, I'm recording this down in the basement. I snuck downstairs real quick to bring you guys an important update about Cyberpunk 2077 system requirements. I did a video about that yesterday, and I was really happy to see that CD Projekt Red released very detailed system requirements, and I understand that some people didn't see the specs they wanted to see. It didn't have every single possible resolution at every possible settings, and it didn't specifically state that the frame rate target was 60 frames per second, but it did give us a lot. It gave us ray tracing on, ray tracing off, at a variety of monitor resolutions, and settings targets, which is much, much better than pretty much any other game developer I've ever seen giving us well before launch. I mean, the typical thing is more like, you know, here's the minimum and here's the recommended, and we're not even telling you what resolution or settings or frame rate that is, right? So I was very happy to see that despite the possible shortcomings of the chart. Wait for full reviews, guys, if you want to see how every single card performs and all of that. Anyway, there was a bit of an issue though, which is if you look at the ray tracing side of the chart, it did not recommend any AMD GPUs. And there was a lot of speculation about that in the comments section. My personal speculation in the comments was that it probably factored in DLSS 2.0. My thought was maybe the ray tracing effects are so demanding that the game doesn't really run without DLSS 2.0. Supporting the frame rates with the ray tracing turned on. So that was what I thought was going on, but that's actually not the case. And for AMD GPU purchasers, if you just bought a 6800 XT or a 6800, or maybe you're planning on getting one for this game and you are interested in ray tracing, because for a lot of you guys right now, you're just like, I just don't care about ray tracing, and I respect that opinion. If you'd rather have the frame rate than the ray tracing, that's fine. That is a valid position, but some people do want the ray tracing. Anyway, if you're interested in that ray tracing and you want to go AMD, or you already did, I've got both good news and some bad news for you. And I also want to thank everybody who has watched that video yesterday. Again, I'm really surprised that in a month and a half, I've got over 3,000 subscribers. That video seemed to get me like 100 and some more, and over 10,000 views, guys. This has been really fun starting out YouTube. But anyway, let's get straight to the point. We've got somebody who just thought, well, how about we ask CD Projekt Red about the AMD ray tracing, right? Let's just ask them. They asked him on Twitter. Let me pull up the tweet and I'll display it on the screen here. So Souls Ninja on Twitter said, hi, I don't know if this is pronounced Marcin, I'm probably just gonna be way off, I'm not even gonna try. What about RT specs for the new AMD cards? Good question, right? That's what everybody's wondering. And he actually responded. He says, not for the release, but we are working together with AMD to introduce this feature as soon as we can. Okay, guys, this is both good news and bad news. Why is it good news? This means that AMD probably will have decent ray tracing support in this game. Maybe it won't be at ultra settings and higher frame rates as the NVIDIA cards, especially if they're using DLSS, but it sounds like they're not saying, oh, AMD cards just can't support the level of ray tracing that we need to do, so it's just not gonna be functional in this game for them. And they're also not saying, we have a proprietary NVIDIA solution for ray tracing and it's not gonna function on AMD cards. That is not what they're saying, and that is good news for AMD owners. They're saying that they will work closely with AMD to get ray tracing working for AMD users, and that is fantastic news. It's also bad news if you wanted to be playing the game with ray tracing on at launch. And some of you guys were probably thinking that even though they didn't recommend the AMD cards, that at launch you would try turning ray tracing on and just see how it went, right? The game uses, as far as we know, a DXR implementation of ray tracing. If you have no idea what that means, basically, there are certain games that only support NVIDIA ray tracing, but those are actually extremely rare. This is like Quake RTX, which honestly is more of a ray tracing tech demo than it is a game. And then we also have like Wolfenstein Youngblood. These are games that NVIDIA specifically helped the implementation of ray tracing. It didn't just help, but they did it in a proprietary manner that wouldn't function on an AMD card unless AMD went to the trouble of updating some kind of support or API to that game to make that work. Most games are using DXR. That's a DirectX feature that is compatible with AMD Ray Tracing. So I'm actually a little bit confused here, because what I was expecting to see, and I think what most people were expecting to see, was that the game would, Cyberpunk 2077, the game, would support AMD cards for ray tracing at launch because it's a DXR ray tracing implementation, and AMD supports that, and the game should support that. It sounds like that's not even going to be an option. Some people were expecting it would work badly at launch and maybe they'd optimize it later. Well, it's sounding like it won't even be available until it has been optimized. And again, maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. If you're thinking in terms of like go Team Red or go Team Green, it might be a good thing for AMD actually to have the ray tracing turned off until it functions well. If you're thinking in terms of like launch day benchmark reviews and things like that. So AMD maybe won't be getting smashed in the ray tracing benchmarks because it's turned off, so you just can't compare it. And then later on, when ray tracing functions for them, then you'll actually be able to compare it. So I could see from that kind of a fanboy go team kind of perspective, maybe it's a good thing eventually. But from just a gamer, and I'm not a fan or detractor from either brand really. And I'm just really excited to see competition in the high-end GPU space finally. I'm just interested in what's going on here. Now, I do have some thoughts. I'm really hoping that this is not a timed exclusivity marketing thing, because we know that, and this is like an NVIDIA showcase game, right? Cyberpunk is partnering with NVIDIA to implement the DLSS 2.0 and using ray tracing as a big feature in the game. So we know that they're working closely with NVIDIA. I'm really hoping that we don't start to see ray tracing becoming a timed exclusivity deal in games, because this kind of feels like that, but I really like CD Projekt Red as a company, so I'd like to think that they're above doing that type of a thing, and that this really is just that the AMD cards launched later, so maybe they haven't had enough time to optimize for them, and that maybe they just feel like they don't want to offer a feature on those cards that isn't going to function well until they get it up and running and optimized. That's what I'd like to believe is happening here. But I'm a little bit worried, because I think, and this is off the top of my head, I haven't read about it recently. If I can find the article, I'll pop it up on the screen when I'm doing editing. But didn't Godfall also kind of do ray tracing as a timed exclusive? In other words, I think that Godfall, being an AMD partner showcase technology kind of a game, I believe in Godfall that ray tracing shadows aren't up and running on NVIDIA yet. Is that correct? Again, like I said, I'll try to check in on that. But if that's the case, I'm really hoping that we don't start seeing this becoming a trend where certain features like ray tracing, which theoretically should be able to run on any card that supports DXR ray tracing, becoming timed exclusivity for NVIDIA or AMD. I understand that there's always been these exclusive features for one brand or the other, particularly NVIDIA with certain things like PhysX and stuff like that, right? Like there's things that might be baked into the card that the other card just can't do. And in the previous generation, ray tracing was one of those things. NVIDIA could do it, AMD couldn't. But now that both brands should support this feature, I'm really hoping that they don't still try to separate that out, especially as like a timed exclusivity thing. I think that would just be bad for gaming. I already hate all the timed exclusive deals like with the Epic Game Store, like how I couldn't play Control for a year unless I wanted to get the Epic Game Store, that kind of a thing. So yeah, I'm not a fan of timed exclusivity, and I'm just really hoping that this is not a sign that we're trending in that direction for ray tracing. Like I said, overall, I think this is good news for AMD owners. The game will be optimized for your ray tracing, to function. The bad news is not at launch. And as far as I can tell, we don't have a specific time frame for that. But I do really like CD Projekt Red as a company. I think they do a good job supporting their games with patches and updates. And I think that they're going to make that a priority, especially if that affects consoles. Now, I haven't looked into this, but it seems to me like that'll probably be the case for the consoles as well, since they're running AMD GPUs. So maybe that ray tracing patch is coming for them as well. And if that's the case for the console segment, I'd imagine this would be a fairly high priority thing for them. And maybe if you're sitting here just waiting to get your 6800 XT in stock or something like that, maybe those things will time out to where you finally get your card in time for 2077 to be updated with the feature you're looking for. What do you guys think about all of this stuff? Let me know in the comment section. And thank you everybody who made it to the end of the video. Think about hitting the like button, maybe subscribing to the channel if you're interested in technology stuff. And I hope that you guys have an excellent day.